If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way. If I had the nerve to speak, you wouldn't hear what I say. Time has come and gone so fast, we're not who we used to be.
And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here with Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. Not only are you a great singer in a really cool funk band, but you're also an attorney. And I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about both. Because one of the things I've always been fascinated, because like my original degree was in paralegal studies. And I knew quarter two, I did not want to work in the law. Like, it is so challenging. And it's like, how do you handle that constant, like, it depends on today and what sort of passion, or not what sort of passion, but what sort of law that you want to apply in this instance? Is there sort of like a finite sort of realm how that works?
Well, I think most lawyers limit themselves to a certain type of law they practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, I started doing family law. And so I only had to learn really kind of four chapters in the Oregon Revised Statutes. I've transitioned to criminal law. There's a whole lot more there. So the kind of day of what applies when and when does this apply there, it's a whole new ballgame for me because I've done that recently. So, I think it's just limiting. There's no way for a lawyer to know everything about the law. Yeah. I get friends who call me and like, I got this ticket doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know either. Like, Google's your friend, my friend.
Right. I could imagine like so many people just randomly asking you for legal advice. It's like, you're not paying me. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's one of the reasons I don't go to church anymore, because it's just kind of, people don't have boundaries, right? Yeah. And they don't typically respect the amount of time or money it got to get you that degree. So, yeah, it's, oh, I know we haven't seen each other in 20 years, says on a Facebook message. But my cousin's husband's brother's fiance got arrested for this.
I could see. Sorry, I only slightly chuckle because, like, I remember when I worked in the legislature, I was a public information officer for the Senate for a session, and the amount of people that would come out of the woodwork and it's like, talk to this legislator, I'm not lobbying on your behalf. Like, I can't do that. I'm just a PIO. Like, all I do is write press releases and do all this other stuff. So it's like, I can so relate to that in so many ways, because it's like people feel sort of entitled almost to sort of cross that boundary without even asking first.
Yeah. I mean, even other professionals, because I just chuckle, and I had a doctor ask me something once and I'm like, well, I have an ingrown toenail. Like, you want to tell me maybe we could do a trade.
But I appreciate the fact that you're getting into criminal though, right? Because like one of the conversations I recently had was with somebody who sort of started this nonprofit to help people post-prison get access to education. And I think a good place for us to start the conversation is by dispelling some of the myths there are about criminal law. Because like so many people automatically assume you're guilty if you're charged. And that's such a flawed reasoning. And can you sort of kind of talk about why that's a flawed reasoning?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're presumed innocent, right? By the Constitution, you're presumed innocent until the state actually proves you're guilty or otherwise, or you admit that you did it. So right now I'm qualified to do misdemeanors. And I think one of the biggest things for people to realize is 90% of those that I actually meet, it's their first time encountering the criminal justice system. And sometimes I look at the files and I think to myself, I could have done that.
Yeah.
That could be me. Or 20 years ago, that would have been me. right? And so, you know, uh, there's a lot of, I'm finding, because I am new at this, a lot of, um, in my opinion, and probably in most criminal defense attorneys' opinions, a lot of overcharging and overreaching by the state, because the state has an immense amount of power. They have all the resources, all the money. They've got the hammer, right? And they're holding these people's liberty in their hands. If you are arrested for something and they don't incarcerate you and hold you until trial, you have to sign off on what's called a release agreement. So you have to agree, no matter what you did, even if it wasn't related, you're not going to enter bars, you're not going to enter taverns, you're not going to drink, you're not going to use cannabis, you're not going to you're going to obey all other laws. There's all these release conditions, and you're presumed innocent, but you still can't do any of these things until your criminal case is resolved. And so it's really, and if you do one of those, you can bet the DA finds out about it. They're going to move to revoke your release agreement, and then you could go to jail, right?
Even if it's like a jaywalking ticket, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can be for anything. Usually a jaywalking ticket is an ordinance issue, not like another crime, but I suppose it's still breaking the law if they wanted to. But say you get into some other kind of trouble, and um, maybe somebody says you stole something, or maybe somebody said you broke something of theirs, or maybe, and this happens in the domestic realm, maybe the ex says that you violated the no contact order of your release agreement and you didn't, but your ex is mad. Now you're looking at, a revocation of your release and then possible new charges for.
Yeah, I have to say my dad went through that when he went through a divorce once where things just got out of hand. And he was not innocent in that whole thing by any stretch of the imagination. But I remember he got into trouble because she showed up at the house and then blamed him for violating the restraining order. And it turned out that ultimately his lawyer got him off because she took that action on beforehand. But he was in jail for 3 days because she showed up at the door. And I always thought that was just strange. And I didn't really process it at the time. Now that I'm older and a little bit wiser, it's like, yeah, rest assured it was not a healthy relationship. But it's like that could have ruined his life.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, because now you get a DV conviction, even a misdemeanor conviction, and it has all kinds of implications for firearms, owning firearms, having a concealed carry permit, being able to purchase firearms in the future. So,
and even some jobs, really
some jobs too. Yeah. School, anything with a background check where you're going to work with the public or people. Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that once you have that sort of designation, it sort of follows you. And it's really, really difficult to get anything off of your record once it's there.
Yes and no. So Oregon passed a law. I'm not sure how long ago it was. It was a couple years ago where, at least with misdemeanors, I think it's 3 years after you've completed your probation, for most crimes, not all, but most, you can get it expunged. And so it wouldn't show anymore. It's actually a pretty easy process that people can access themselves because by statute, they have to expunge it. So, and certain felonies too, but I mean, there are driving convictions you can never expunge for the obvious reasons, public safety reasons, certain sex offense types. There's some others too, but if it's expungible, there's nothing the DA can do to stop you from getting it. It's about a 4 or 5 month process and then it's gone.
See, that's so much better than Washington State. Because in Washington State at the time, I remember going through that expungement process, and because there was somebody that had a speeding ticket after they got a misdemeanor, they wouldn't let them expunge their record.
Yeah. I mean, I think Oregon's pretty good. They don't want to be punitive to people who have made a mistake in the past, right? Yeah. Because there's housing implications, there's work implications, all of that can really just for a minor mistake I had a client tell me it was the worst 2 minutes of my life. Those 2 minutes do not reflect who I am as a person. And that's stuck with me because I think oftentimes it is the 2 minutes where maybe you just see red, and that's not normally who you are as a person, not your baseline.
Yeah, and all those people that are quick to judge, I always take a step back and say, just you have no idea what that person was going through at that moment in time, and what sort of stuff they were going through, what they were dealing with emotionally, all this other stuff, and it all has sort of impacts. And really, by the grace of God, any one of us could fall victim for any one of these misdemeanors, depending on the situation in the day. You know, you not have a coffee, you're not thinking straight. You walk out with a cup of coffee, now you've got a misdemeanor theft charge.
Yeah, that or I mean, I look at some a very common charge is child neglect.
Oh, interesting.
And I look at that and go, "Oh my gosh, I did that as a parent 20 years ago. That could be me." Because um you may have somebody who's making that charging decision that's not a parent and has never been put in that situation.
Yeah.
And doesn't have the practical experience to ask themselves, is that normal? Could that be me? Or literally, this is what the statute said, so I can charge them, right?
Okay. That's interesting. And then once you're charged, then you have to go through the court process,
You do.
which is very daunting
You do.
and very confusing. Um, because most of the time, I would imagine this is the case. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a connection between poverty and criminal justice? Do you see a lot more criminal cases for people who are in poverty than you do as people who aren't in poverty?
I mean, I do only simply because I'm court appointed. So if they can't afford an attorney, they're going to get me. So most of the time, there's a threshold. I think in general, probably the statistics do bear that out.
And so the reason I bring that up is because one of the things they always tell you about going to court is dressing up in a suit, dressing up in a tie. And then when you're a defendant who doesn't have that, and sitting at that table, I would imagine if a jury of your peers is looking at this person who looks guilty, who looks uncomfortable, all this other stuff, and really they're just sort of out of place in an environment where people aren't talking like them. They don't understand the words that are being used. They don't really kind of understand the situation. And so thank goodness they have a defense attorney to sort of help them through that process. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I will say that oftentimes my clients before they've been appointed an attorney are highly anxious. They're worried because there's two ways with misdemeanors. I get a client. Number one, they're cited by a ticket when the offense happens, and so it's something generally nonviolent where it doesn't require a mandatory arrest. And so the officer will just put a date and time they have to show up at the annex. Okay. The second way is they are arrested and they're in custody. So some cases can take several months before they actually get charged. And during that time, that person is stressing out. Am I going to have to go to jail? Oh my goodness. And then when they get the attorney, I probably get the question 10 or 15 times. Am I going to have to go to jail?
Yeah.
Next time I come to court, am I going to have to go to jail? And flip that to the first time I meet the person that is actually in custody in the jail. It's just like you see it on the TV. They're kind of in a box or a booth with plexiglass. There's a tiny little hole that I have to try to speak through, but I have to mute the mic too because it's being recorded. So if they say something that incriminates themselves, I don't want that getting recorded for the DA to use against them at, subsequent hearings or whatever.
Can I pause right there for a second? So you mean to say that when you're in that environment, they don't have a way to just shut off the microphone because it is a client talking to their attorney?
So I can mute it. I have to stand and there's a red button. I have to stand and mute the button so they can't talk. But because of the plexiglass, they're talking kind of loud. You're talking kind of loud. People can hear sometimes what you're saying.
Yeah.
No matter how quiet you're trying to be, they can still kind of hear you. And, a lot of these people, again, it is maybe their first time, or maybe they're frequent flyers who think they actually know more than the lawyer talking to them. I've got about 30, 40 seconds to assess what I need from them to figure out if I can get them out. And kind of talk to them real quick about the charges. And oftentimes they're in a state where I would say they're overwhelmed and aren't thinking clearly because of the stress of the situation.
Yeah, because once you're in periods of high stress like that, your executive functioning is the first to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell people all the time, they're recording this, don't say this, and they keep talking. Like it doesn't occur to them that they're actually could be really seriously hurting themselves.
Yeah, because if you say something that they can use against you, they're going to.
They may likely use it against you, or maybe it undercuts. Maybe they said something when I get the police report and I'm like, ooh, they didn't get read their Miranda rights. I can do a motion to suppress their statements. But then they say it again in court after they've been warned. Like, you know, there are all kinds of circumstances where it's kind of like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people are human, and I think I see them at some of their most vulnerable, stressed out stage at those arraignments.
And it's interesting to me with the system the way it is. As soon as you have that sort of charge, and you're talking about all of the parameters that you have to abide by, it's almost like, because I'm thinking about it, and it's just sort of I'm processing it right now, that even though you're innocent until proven guilty, you're in essence having a lot of your rights stripped away.
Oh, it is one of my biggest eye-opening moments of when my client pleads and they have to do an additional 18 to 36 months of probation. And I'm like, but in effect, they've been on probation. You know, if their case doesn't go to court for a year, they've in effect been on probation. It's the same terms.
And the clock just starts over.
It starts over. And they're under this probation, right? When they're presumed innocent, not after they've said, I did it. It's really, I think, not fair, and kind of is part of the reason why I think so many people assume, well, you're arrested, you must have done it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to pause for a second. I don't know if you're going to ask me a question, but I think this goes along with the people thinking they've been arrested, I might as well, or they must have done it, right? One of the biggest things, if I could tell anybody listening to this that is ever accused of a crime or being investigated by the police, be quiet, don't say a thing, invoke your Fifth Amendment right.
Right off the bat.
You will not help yourself with any statement you make. 9 out of 10 times when the cops come to talk to you, they've already made up their mind.
It's already confirmation bias.
It is. They've talked to the named or alleged victim in it. They think they know what happened, and they're operating from an assumption you did it. And so anything you say can be twisted, can be used. And I'm not saying that police officers are being horrible when they do that. They're doing their jobs, right? Their job is to keep us all safe. I'm just saying, invoke your right, because your defense attorney, I can guarantee you, will love you and you will be their star client. Just don't say a word.
Yeah. And it's the easiest thing for people to do. And yet I see time and time and time again that people don't.
No, and the most common thing that people say to me when I'm like, why'd you talk to the cops? The most common thing that they say to me is, well, I thought they'd think I was guilty if I stayed silent. And I'm like, what's it matter what the police thought?
Yeah.
They're not the ones that are going to be responsible for getting the conviction. They're responsible for putting you in jail.
And they have things that they have to hear that fits their sort of profile on their paperwork.
Yep.
And so they're looking for these buzzwords. And if you say a buzzword to a police officer that marks off, oh, I can, because basically once you're arrested, or not even arrested, but even sort of under investigation, they already have in their reference or in their minds which criminal charge they're going to put forth to the prosecutor. And so they're looking for you to say things or do things that would help them substantiate a charge.
Yep.
So they're not your friends. They are there. They're doing a job that needs to be done, right? At the same time, they don't have your interest at heart.
No, they, I mean, in a perfect world, they would be neutral.
Yeah.
Right. But they work for the state, and ultimately they work for the state. I mean, they could work for the city or the county. Same thing, though. And they don't work for you when they're investigating a crime. Right. They're there to find the evidence, not necessarily to find the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And having that safe space where you can talk to your attorney and just be open and honest about everything that's happening. And that's another thing I want people to understand too, right? If you have an attorney, be open and honest with your defense attorney. Tell them everything, because they need to know so that they can be best effective in helping you.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the first things I tell a client is, whatever you and I talk about is confidential. I can't say anything without your express permission. And I'll give an example from my family law years. I had a parent who the other parent, my client was being accused of using drugs, some serious hard drugs. And my client denied it. And the judge ordered a hair follicle test. And guess what?
Came back positive.
Had the client been honest with me from the very, very beginning, I could have mitigated that damage. We could have went to the judge and said, this person is not a regular user. This was a one-time event due to a depressive episode. Like, this is not typical. But instead, the client ended up not seeing their kids for a year because of this. So you don't help yourself, because the reality is I might make statements because I believe you. And then I might say that to the court, and then I might have to withdraw because in being candid to the court from my perspective, now you've caused me to fib to the court, right? So now we're in an adversarial position where I can't ethically represent you any longer. So it's just best to let me know what everything is, because, you might think something's going to hurt you, but in the end, it actually might help you. So.
Yeah. And I used to work in child welfare, and whenever we had parents with substance use issues, we would always say, just be open and honest and get help, and we can work with you. Because if you try to hide it, it ends up costing you more in the long run. Because I'm of the mind of most people that have substance use disorder can't help it. Like, substance use is one of those things where if you're addicted, you're addicted, and you probably will need extra steps and extra help to get over that addiction. And one of the things I'm curious about, what is the current system like for people facing sort of that kind of crime? Because I know marijuana is legal now. They sort of walked back on some other legalities. Is the criminal justice system still sort of in the business of helping people find treatment?
Well, I think that a condition of any plea with substance abuse or possession, really it's a possession crime, that it's going to have a drug treatment package. You're going to end up getting referred. I wish, so when I was in law school, I clerked for 2 years at the Department of Justice in the Child Advocacy section, which is Oregon's section that represents the Department of Human Services that does child welfare, termination of parental rights, those kinds of things. And one thing in my 2 years I noticed was, and this was back in the mid 2000s, so 2007 and 8, I think is when I was there, maybe 9 too. a lot of people who used meth had undiagnosed ADHD. And what I also find now doing court appointed work is there are co-mental health and substance abuse issues. And it's like saying, is it the chicken or the egg? Which came first? They really need, I mean, I think for somebody to be successful in their substance abuse, if mental health is driving it, they really need both.
Yeah.
But the system forces one over the other.
That's interesting to me. Because I think you're absolutely right. The two are intrinsically connected.
Most of the time. Yeah. Usually they're using as a if it's a long-term use, it could be with meth. Oftentimes with meth, it's that ADHD. Like every time I ask somebody who's a meth user, oh yeah, I have ADHD, right? Because for them, meth levels them out. Like they have to use crazy amounts to get high, right?
Yeah.
But also, if you talk to people about their substance abuse, you find out there's trauma somewhere back there that they haven't dealt with, and they use it to numb. So I don't, there are very few people I meet that do it because it's just fun.
Yeah.
Right.
It's something I just want to do all the time.
Yeah.
It's more like self-medicating. And then you have that self-medicating without government, without a medical professional, and then also without mental health. And then, of course, with meth itself, the way it's made and manufactured, it's not healthy compared to the actual mental health meds.
Yeah, no, I mean, meth is not the same as an actual pharmaceutical stimulant. And there are non-stimulant options too. But yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And then you get somebody who's addicted, that the mental health part of it. And I think this is where the criminal justice system comes in, is they're just getting popped over and over and over for possession, right? And there's nothing anybody is going to do, and possession is a misdemeanor. And so they're just going to come in, come out. I mean, I saw one guy, not long ago that had like 4 or 5 open possessions cases. And so with those, yeah, mental health, but actually just now we're dealing with the addiction realm of you should deal with both, but really that person needs to be in some kind of serious treatment, because drug mandated or court mandated treatment where you go in once a week is not going to do it with somebody like that.
No, and it sets them up for failure.
It does.
Because, like, if you don't take somebody that's that sort of involved in their addiction and completely separate them from their addictive environment, it's doomed for failure. So they report once a week, but then they come back to all of their friends that are using, back to their family members or other stuff that they're using. It's almost, I would say, almost impossible to sort of break that cycle without sort of removing that person from that environment.
Yeah.
At least until the addiction piece is sort of under control.
Yeah. And then we touched a little bit about mental health. I will tell you, the hardest part of this transition is dealing with those who are truly mentally ill. And oftentimes the cases come forward because they do something to a family member when they're in psychosis, and then they end up with a criminal charge. And they come to me and they are in psychosis, so they can't help, right? So then I end up having to get them evaluated. They have to do what's called an aid and assist evaluation. And then if that comes back that they actually cannot assist in their defense, they get sent to the Oregon hospital, state hospital. But the goal there is just to get them stabilized so they can assist in their criminal matter. It is not to actually connect them to help, right? So it's these families call the police because they're at the end of their rope. They don't know what to do for their loved ones. And then what ends up happening is a no contact order between the person and the alleged victim, mom, girlfriend, dad, brother, whatever. And then now we're in this cycle of how do we help this person? They are actually the saddest cases I have.
And that one hits close to home because it impacts so many people in the autistic community. Like I see these kind of situations all the time where somebody's in a sensory meltdown and
Yes.
people misunderstand that. And so instead of giving space or not getting involved, they put themselves in the situation, end up getting hurt, getting hit, getting pushed. And now this person who has a mental illness is going to jail because somebody else wanted to intervene in a situation where you just let the person melt down, relax, and sort of do whatever they need to do. But then they're stuck with this criminal charge. And then as soon as they have that, what also happens, what I'm finding out now, is they can't go back to their treatment facility. In some cases, they can't go back to any treatment facility. So you have these people who are non-speaking autistic, who are living on the streets or living in substandard conditions because they can no longer be in a home that supports them because the home they were put in can't support them in the first place.
Yeah, those are hard. I
Ugh.
I had a case with somebody who was had very cognitive. I don't want to give too many details because I don't know who listens and I've got ethical implications. But what I will say is this person had the cognitive ability of a 5-year-old.
Oh, those are the toughest ones.
And so, again, I do an aid and assist, and just the behavior in court at appearances was not typical. It was obvious to everybody in the court that this person was cognitively not there, right? So, I have to get an evaluation. I get an evaluation. Now think in terms of tax dollars here. We have somebody who presents as, this person, the cop had to have known. Everybody has to know this person is not culpable.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I've got to get an evaluation. That's $4 or $5 right there for public defense funds while we're in a public defense crisis, by the way. And we don't have funds with the state, right? And then all the weeks that it takes for the reappearances, waiting for that evaluation to come back. Now, ultimately, this person's case was dismissed because sure as heck, you can't charge a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, it might not have been bodily, or biologically 5, but mentally 5. And sweetest client, but had no clue what was going on.
Yeah.
No clue. And so those are rough too, because, if you're at that cognitive ability, again, you're housed somewhere.
Yeah.
So the emphasis for the defense counsel should be, how do I get this dismissed? And how quickly do I get this dismissed?
And what kind of supports can we get this person so it doesn't happen again?
Right. If it can be. I mean, with a 5-year-old, with the cognitive ability of somebody at 5, you're not going to be able to teach that. The 5-year-old is the 5-year-old is going to grow and mature and learn. If you're stuck at a 5 or 6 cognitive, you don't know. You don't know. And so you can't really rehab that person.
Because they lack the ability to process in their brains. They haven't developed beyond that stage where
they don't see that this action causes this consequence. I did this before. If I do it again, then this is going to happen again.
Yeah, they can't make that connection.
No connection at all. And the kind of and you're not sure as criminal defense at that cognitive level that the confession that they may have made to the police, whether they actually did it or they just want everybody to go away.
Yeah.
So they're not reliable reporters either.
I know what you mean there. So like my trauma response is to fawn. So I will tell whomever is standing in front of me whatever they want to hear just so I can get out of the situation. And that's how my autism manifests. And so one of the things that I'm always cognizant or always aware of is what I say in stressful situations, because I will fib, I will lie, I will say whatever just so that trauma stops. And I don't know if I can help it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's difficult. Now I have a soft spot for the autism community because my nephew is autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes, you know, oftentimes there are people that I get that remind me very much of my nephew. And so um, that is helpful for me in dealing with the client because I recognize, some of the tics or some of the, oh goodness, this person isn't taking this information in, or, oh, they're stressed and need a distraction, or, those kinds of things. So that's been helpful experience. But when you're dealing with the criminal justice system, it's trying to put what is that saying, it's a one size fits all, and we're not all the same.
Yeah, I see that, because it should be approached sort of like at the individual level as opposed to like everybody's part of the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I realize it would be very difficult to approach every case holistically, but we're dealing with people's lives. We should be approaching it holistically.
And one of the things too that I want to touch on, because it's something that sort of came on my radar the last few weeks, is this concept of restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more I hear about it, the more I'm like, why isn't this taking off? Like, can you sort of explain what restorative justice is?
Yeah, so it's the thought of most punishments are punitive in nature. They are meant to hammer the person, and the punishment itself is supposed to deter them from further actions, right? And so the worst punishment you can think of that is punitive in nature is the death penalty, right? You can't take that back. When we look at restorative justice, we look at if somebody goes to prison in particular. I'll deal with the thought of prison rather than some of the smaller crimes. That we know that if we can put them back into the community, give them education, give them supports, connect them, make sure they have a job, make sure they have mentors, right? They aren't going to repeat. The recidivism rates are low. And so the thought is that we get them to connect and to rehabilitate and to become functioning members of society, right? It's part of the reason Oregon rehabbed their expungement laws, right? So that you aren't punitive, or why some states are looking at, well, why can't a felon never vote again? Why is that something you lose forever for a minor felony, right? That you did 12 years ago. And why shouldn't felons have a say in this stuff? They're still a member of society.
They're paying taxes, they're working.
If they're out, yeah. But even if they're incarcerated, they're still a member of society. The laws that we make are still affecting them.
I get what you're saying. So like, even like, so you have a felony of, I can't think of it, like car theft, like, or whatever. And instead of saying, because you've committed this crime, you no longer have the ability to participate in representative government, even though you're incarcerated, you're still a member of our society. Why shouldn't you be able to sort of continue to have a voice in the way politics are?
Sure. I would even push that with murderers. I don't see any difference. They're still a member of their general population, might be prison, but they're still a part of society, and they are still affected by the legislation that our elected representatives pass.
Yeah.
And so why shouldn't they have some type of, and in some cases maybe they got a job in prison and they're not getting paid minimum wage.
Yeah, like $2 an hour or something like that.
I don't know what it is, but it's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
so there's and even in their prisons, even if they're not getting paid in general, maybe they're still doing some kind of work and they're getting work credit, but they're still in a community and part of our community.
Right, because that way they don't have this message completely that we've lost you as a member of our society.
Yeah.
Because like as soon as you have that conviction that everybody treats you like you're for lack of a better term, a second-class citizen
Or a non-person,
or a non-person
with no rights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're still people.
There's still people, and I would challenge again. I always think of, I just said earlier that I had a client that said it was the worst 2 minutes of my life. Okay.
Yeah.
I think with a murder, maybe it's the worst hour of their life. I don't know. Very few people, very small percentage of the population are sociopaths, right? You can read the stories of people who have committed murder, and they're people with some pretty darn traumatic past. And you and I might not make that decision, but I also didn't walk in their shoes.
Yeah.
And I'm not excusing what a convicted, murderer did, but I also know that there are people that plead to crimes that didn't do what they pled to.
100%. 100%. Like I'm a huge follower of the Justice Project that they have, and all of the people that were 100% innocent and plead guilty to something that they didn't do.
Or they're convicted when they were innocent, put on death row. That's even worse.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, I part of the reason I transitioned to criminal law was a client that I had that was accused of some pretty horrific, serious crimes. And I had represented this client for a number of years. And as much as you can be positive your client didn't do what they were accused of, I was convinced my client didn't do it. When you're Oregon has they're called Measure 11 crimes, which is mandatory sentencing. So the judge has no discretion. With certain crimes, there is a set amount of time they cannot go below. So this client was facing over 60 years in prison. And this was when I was doing family law. And this client had custody of their children. And so the choice, as we got closer and closer to trial on the criminal matter, the DA came to my client and said, if you plead to this felony and 2 misdemeanors, you could be out in 4 to 6 months. Now, and I had to say to this client, and on top of that, I can work at keeping custody of your kids. But if you're convicted of 1, you will go away for 5 years. If you're convicted of all, it's over 60. You'll spend the rest of your life in jail, in prison. And so in that case, the client pled because you can control your destiny at that point, right? And as much as I can be convinced that I had a client that went and did time for being innocent, I am convinced that that is that client. And that whole experience soured me incredibly because it didn't, there are certain there are certain, the rules of evidence. There are some things that the jury or the judge will never hear because we want to protect the alleged victim. And those are items that most oftentimes would create the biggest amount of reasonable doubt in your jury's minds, but they're never going to hear it. So in cases like rape, right? If somebody's cried false before, or if somebody threatened to do, false crimes, or, a lot of that stuff the jury will never hear because of rape shield laws.
Interesting.
And so then you end up with, issues where the DA knows that's out there, but knows they can keep it out, right? And so then your biggest defense goes out the window. So I had a friend who was a foster father, he and his wife, and they took in this teenage girl, and I was still in law school at the time, and she accused him of doing something. Well, what DHS didn't tell him was she had also accused 2 previous foster fathers of doing something. And none of them did it. And neither did this person. And this person was in law enforcement, but early one morning, he got a raid where the police came in with a warrant and took a bunch of his stuff, and he got arrested. And I think it was 1.5 or 2 years fighting with the DA, doing all the things that you do, taking lie detector tests, and doing all of that. And the DA just saying, well, those prior accusations will never come in. I can get this conviction. It wasn't about what was doing right. It was about what could be kept out or kept in. And then, over $100,000 in legal fees only for the state to dismiss.
And of course, that whole time he can't work because he's in law enforcement.
Right. And that's the kind of stink that doesn't go away, right? Because his picture was all over Fox News, at the local KPTV. You can still Google his name to this day and find his mugshot. He will never be law enforcement again.
Yeah.
Ever.
And that's disheartening. That's it, because like when I was in school, one of the things that they taught us was that the jury of your peers got to hear the entire story and was able to make their judgment based on all of the information. And if some of that kind of information is excluded, how do you make a fair and honest, open judgment if you're missing a third of the story?
Yeah, and it's just the rules, right? Because the judge, I'm a huge football fan, giant football fan. So
Yeah.
The judge is just the ref.
Yeah.
That's all the judge is, right? And the criminal defense attorney and the DA, they're just the head coaches of their teams, telling them where to go where, right? And my client's my star player. And so the judge is just, he or she has that playbook, which is similar to our revised statutes. And they're the ones that decide what is allowed in and what is allowed out, just like a ref would in a football game.
Interesting. And the amount of power that they have over that information is huge.
Sure. And it's not just the criminal justice system. You can turn on the news and see immigration right now.
Yeah.
And one thing that people don't understand is immigration judges are not Article 3 judges, which means they're not appointed like a normal federal judge. They are what are called administrative law judges. And so they are actually hired and employed by the Department of Justice. So some of the stories that we're hearing out there where they're dismissing these asylum cases, what we're finding out by the court record is the administrative law judge is talking to the immigration prosecutor or attorney. They're deciding what to do before the actual immigrant or the asylum seeker ever enters the room and hits the counsel table. So your administrative law judge and your prosecutor, it's 2 against 1.
Well, that sheds a light on a lot of things.
It's scary is what it is.
Because, they basically have no rights.
Very few.
Yeah. And so you have no rights to begin with. And then when you enter in that sort of environment where it's your decisions already made before you even have a chance to speak, that's terrifying.
Right. Or like these ICE raids that are going on in LA, right? They're doing these without judge signed warrants, which is questionably a Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment violation, right?
That's interesting. I did not know that.
So, it's immigration is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. And I only bring it up because I think that we do talk about it in terms of undocumented people entering into this country not legally, and I want to make a caveat in saying if they entered in on asylum, they came here legally.
Yeah,
okay,
100%. We're not
people
talking
conflate those.
Yeah, and it's two different things.
Right, it is. But people are like, well, they came here illegally and they're criminals. They committed a crime. Actually, it's similar to if you have a speeding ticket. It's a violation of an ordinance. It's not what we consider a misdemeanor class A. You're going to jail for a long time. It can be under certain circumstances, but the average person, it's not. And so it's being treated that way. And they don't have the rights that my clients have. If I find out the police took my client's blood or took their property without a signed warrant, we're going to have some problems, right? Yeah. If the DA doesn't indict somebody for a felony within so many days after taking them into custody, the case is going to be dismissed. It's not the case in the immigration world.
You could just hold somebody indefinitely.
Forever, it seems like, with some of these people. And you don't have to tell their lawyer where they're... I mean, the things I read, you don't have to tell the lawyer where they are. And
sometimes they don't even know.
And sometimes there's a case I've been following for a while. I think her name is Marillo in Washington, but she is an Oregon resident. They were not allowing her to talk to her attorney. That's a constitutional right. So, yeah.
Let that sink in for a second, folks.
I mean, federal courts are having to issue orders that say you must allow the immigrant, the litigant, to speak to their attorney. It's a big thing in LA too. It's just nuts to me. Or you'll hear the stories where a ICE raid gets picked up and it's 4 or 5 days before anybody figures out where somebody is. And that just happened in LA to a citizen. It's just crazy.
Yeah, because instead of doing the due diligence and double checking and all that stuff, they just arrest everybody and then figure it out 5 days later.
Well, not everybody, every brown person. Let's be very clear about this.
Fair. That's
so,
fair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's 100% legit. Yeah, because it's like you're targeting minorities with this sort of thing.
Right. And immigration does tie into what I do. So, for instance, I have to tell my clients that if you get convicted of this, this may end your application for U.S. citizenship. Or if you're here with something other than permanent status, or if you're not a citizen, you could be deported. And if you're undocumented, you likely will be deported.
Yeah, even if you have all of the paperwork and you have like asylum or whatever, it's really easy with a conviction just to say, doesn't matter if you've been here 25 years, you're going to be deported back to your country.
Yeah, they have to be warned. There's a case called Padilla where you have to warn them about their status.
Okay. But still, just a warning and then that's it, right?
Well, a warning, it's kind of for more serious. So if somebody is charged with a felony, you actually need to go through and get kind of a consultation with an immigration attorney before they plea. With misdemeanors in general, when you enter into a plea, the court will say, because we're a sanctuary state, we don't ask people what their citizenship. I do, I have to. But the court's not going to ask the person that's pleading if they're a citizen. So the way they handle it is they'll say, now I have to say this to everybody. Did your attorney tell you that if you're that this could affect you could if you're here unlawfully or here undocumented, that this could lead to your deportation, or it could also make it so that you're denied your citizenship application.
Whew. The stakes are high in that game. And I say game on purpose because it's kind of like they're playing a game.
Sure, if I have a DACA, particularly with misdemeanors, okay, if I have a DACA recipient, I'm going to tell him almost every time, let's play chicken and take it to trial, because there's no reason for you to settle.
Yeah.
I mean, there's none.
Because the stakes are going to be the same no matter what.
Yep.
You might as well take it to trial.
You might as well take it to a jury of your peers and do it.
So how does all this change? Like, or are we kind of stuck with it for the next at least 3 years?
I am of the opinion the current administration, federal administration, is showing us huge gaping holes none of us knew we had. And it's going to take far more brilliant minds than mine to close some of those loopholes. I think this has been in the making for about 40 years. And so I don't know that you and I are going to see it in our lifetime change. I think the best help for change is at our local levels, and getting the state laws, going more towards a restorative justice model, treating each person holistically, going more towards changing the general opinion of mental health.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
Really, one thing this whole thing might do is change people's opinions about whether somebody is presumptively guilty or innocent. It can have some positive impacts as well. So, I mean, how do we change it? The system is, I hate to say this, I don't think there's a better system out there.
Yeah.
But we're definitely having it exposed. And I think it really is going to rely on the state levels, and then our state AGs pushing back on the federal government to change some things once this, whether it's midterms or this current administration is no longer here.
And one of the things that comes to mind when you say that is I remember taking a political science class, and my professor at the time said something very profound that I'll never forget. He said, the form of government that is the United States is the worst government on the planet, except for every other form of government on the planet. So is it optimal? No. Is it the best that we got? Possibly. Because, at the same time, we live in the greatest country, but so many people are suffering. And it's it's such a hard thing.
Yeah. Our Constitution is based on a social contract.
Yeah.
And so what happens, as is current, where two sides are so polarized about what life should look like in this country, and the middle is apathetic.
Yeah.
And just swings whichever way is more outraged at the moment. And that's the least perfect way for me to explain it. But certainly that social contract, if not all players are coming to the table and playing, how does it work? It doesn't. We have a one side that doesn't want to follow the social contract anymore and is just making up rules as they go.
Yeah.
And the other side screaming, but you have to follow the rules, you know? So, and then there's those of us in the middle going, good God, what are you people doing?
Because like I remember like the last, so like the last, like there are some times during the election cycle where I look at the options available and I question myself and like, is this the best our country has to offer? Like these are the choices that we have. Like I don't understand. And then I remember my own silly political journey and I understand because you can't be in the current system. You can't be yourself and run for office. You have to pick a side 100% or another side 100%, or they won't let you run. And so to be an actual independent in this country and like run for your own personal beliefs and value system is almost impossible at this point.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think, I think, 9-year-old Lisa wanted to be president
Yeah.
someday. 50-year-old Lisa you couldn't pay me to do that job. The fishbowl you live in, the things people are going to try to dig up. You ask, why are these our only options? Because those people are the only ones narcissistic enough to not care what mud is slung at them.
100%. 100%. And you kind of have to be a narcissist to survive that kind of.
You kind of have a good size
Yeah.
ego to get past that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because it's hard not to take stuff like that because you are attacked personally on stuff that you just don't even see coming, and it's just bitter and petty, and it's just
And it doesn't even matter if it's true or not.
100%.
So like
Yeah.
somebody could say whatever about me, and how do you defend yourself about it? Prove a non-true thing didn't happen. Like, how do you prove a negative? And that relates back to criminal law. Like, you think somebody is accused of doing something and they didn't do it. It's not my job to prove my client didn't do it, but how would I prove the negative anyway?
Yeah.
Unless there's a timestamp that this person was 100 miles away on video somewhere else and couldn't have possibly done. But who does that?
And so circling back to the criminal piece, because one of the things that I'm also discovering is what I thought were like valid scientific forensic sort of measures that prove innocence or guilt are coming to light as being like flawed, like bite mark evidence, for example. So how do you combat that as a defense attorney when stuff like that's thrown in your face?
Well, I mean, you always have the ability to hire your own expert. So, if you have a case of, say, animal abuse where the animal died and there's a necropsy, a good criminal defense attorney is going to hire somebody else to look at the same evidence. You're going to do that with bite mark too. You're going to find an expert that's going to say that it's faulty, right? That's really how you counter it. The problem is there are so many that have been accepted for so many years. And now we're just figuring out how bad that science was.
Yeah.
But, brilliant, part of the reason we stop accepting it is because brilliant defense attorneys keep fighting it and pushing it and getting expert, attention on certain matters. And, that's just what they keep doing. I mean, one of the worst pieces of evidence is eyewitness testimony.
Oh, yeah.
And you think that'd be the best.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah, we had an incident of that just this last week. A friend of mine, totally not criminally related, but this kind of goes to the point, right? So there was somebody on her block that lit off a really big firework, and 4 neighbors were outside, and 3 of the neighbors swore it was an earthquake. And the fourth neighbor was like, I saw the firework. Like, I saw the M80 go off, but it didn't matter. Those three we had an earthquake. And so just like in that prime example of like four people that will never come to the same thing, even though they were 150 feet apart, but they all saw something completely different. It's like, how do you wrestle that with eyewitness testimony?
I mean, it's great for the criminal defense, right? Because now we can be like, well, but, you know, 3 people said it was an earthquake, so it must be an earthquake, even though it was the darn firework, right? I mean, nothing registered with the earthquake. The people who, you know, track that, nothing registered that day in that area.
Yeah.
But,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So that's so fascinating because it's like the cornerstone of evidence usually is eyewitness testimony, right?
Yep.
And so, like, is it unreliable just because of the way our memory works?
It could be depending on what the crime is. So say you're in a bank and there's 20 of you in the bank and 3 people come in with guns. You're flooded with adrenaline. You're not thinking correctly. You're thinking about, I hope I don't die. You know, as somebody who was in a bank when it was robbed, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily looking at the person holding the gun either.
Well,
right?
yeah, I would imagine you're trying to avoid eye contact.
You're trying to avoid all kinds of things, right? You don't want them to look at you. You don't want to draw any kind of attention to yourself. So, you know, it just is, it is hard. And people respond to trauma differently.
Right. And depending on how you respond to trauma is going to impact how your memory of that day's events happen.
Yeah, what you perceive, what the inputs were to you, and how you relay that.
Because your mind fills in the gaps.
Your mind does fill in the gaps.
And sometimes it fills in the gaps with stuff that's totally not right.
That's correct.
How interesting. I'm letting that sink in for a minute. Because that's like the cornerstone of all of the crime dramas that you see is that sort of eyewitness testimony that if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't be found guilty.
Sure. Or just like DNA. I didn't know until I saw a case that there's such a thing as transfer DNA, which means that it's not necessarily means that that person did anything to you, just simply they touched something or something. Like if you're processing a lot of stuff and they rub against each other, that doesn't necessarily mean that person's DNA is the person that actually did it.
Because they're taking random samples and you have no idea at what point that DNA was actually entered into the equation.
Yeah, or there can be you know, you could, I'm trying to think of a real life example that I could give of this. I think, what was that show? Transfer DNA was a big thing on Netflix with the guy and the kid that confessed to a crime and then spent years.
Oh, the Massey thing, the making a murder.
Yeah. So there was part of the problem was transfer DNA in that one. And so it's you don't know if it happens in a lab. You don't know if somebody touches something and then as a part of that particle leaves it somewhere else, like one of the investigators or something. You don't know. I mean, I don't understand the whole science about that, but it could be possible.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I could see, like, you know, even like, let's say you and I came up and we had a handshake or whatever, and your DNA got on my sleeve, and then 4 hours later, that DNA is in the house somewhere because I laid the sweater down on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
Fascinating. Oof.
I mean, I don't know how long. I don't know if there's I'm not an expert or scientist, but
yeah,
you know, I don't know how long DNA particles lay somewhere or do whatever, but
that kind of shook me to the core because it was one of those things where I just thought DNA was DNA evidence.
For the most part, it is.
Yeah.
But that, if you have a case where you're like, the person said, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
And DNA says they did it, but maybe they got a solid alibi somewhere else. Then you got to start asking, why does the DNA say that he or she did it, right?
Even though they have a solid, rock solid alibi.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I mean, I guess they could have an identical twin somewhere, theoretically. But
and it see that's fascinating to me, because like I would think even with a rock solid alibi, I could see examples of police still having that pigeonhole or still having that confirmation bias, but the DNA is there. He must be lying about the alibi.
mm-hmm.
Instead of just saying, we know he wasn't there, let's look for someone else.
Right. I mean, again, it goes back to that whole thing of, do you have a video with that person at that place with a confirmed timestamp and date on it, that's 100 miles away?
Yeah. Do you recommend folks have videos at home?
I mean, I have them in my yard. I would never personally have them in my home.
That's kind of what I meant, though, like with the Ring camera facing outside or something that sort of has that sort of timestamp so you can say this is when I went home.
Yeah, I mean, I have that at home just for safety precautions. I think it's just a smart thing to do, but it certainly could help you if you're walking into your house at noon, but somebody said that you were somewhere else noon, 100 miles away, committing a murder. It's kind of hard to argue with your Ring video.
Yeah, because like up until I've had sort of these kind of conversations, I couldn't fathom a scenario where I would be arrested for murder. But so many people I know that have been, I shouldn't say so many people I've known, so many people I've read about that were completely innocent and were charged and convicted of murder. It's like, maybe I'm not so far removed from that happening.
No, I don't think. I always say to people, some people will turn their GPSs off their phone. Don't do that. That's another good timestamp for you too. Like, if your Google is, or if your Apple phone is logging into places somewhere else, I've used that in family court before on a restraining order where my client, the alleged victim, kept saying my client was coming to that person's house over and over and over. And yet my client's GPS had them over an hour away every single time. It avoided a charge for the person. Probably several, actually.
Yeah. And if you're not up to anything nefarious and you're not doing anything illegal, why turn off your GPS?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's another way to protect yourself, especially if you're in a toxic relationship. Why not protect yourself in those really easy, manageable ways?
That's a lot to digest. We've been at this for an hour and 10 minutes already. And we hadn't even gotten a chance to sort of talk about your singing career. And I'm sorry about that.
Nah, I've sang forever, so.
And so this change to sort of criminal, has it been like a steep learning curve?
It's a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
I am really blessed. I'm a part of what's called the Marion County, MCAD. Why can I never forget? I always forget. It's Marion County Defenders. Anyway, it's an associate. They're going to, if they listen to this, they're going to ream me. It's been a long day. I've been at it since 7 a.m. So anyway, what we are is we're Marion County Association of Defense Attorneys. So what we are we're all independent attorneys, but we are part of an association contracted with the state to provide court-appointed services. And I think there's 30, 40 attorneys in Marion County. And I am very, very blessed to have some very fine and experienced criminal law attorneys that are mentoring or available for any kind of questions. While the judges can't really help me so much, they have been very gracious in my learning curve.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at transitioning to criminal law, two newer judges in particular really encouraged me to do that. Basically, telling me that having the trial experience I had in family court, though not to jury trials, would transfer over well. And they were right. So as far as the learning curve goes, there's so much to learn. But I've been at it 12 or 13 years. And so generally speaking, if I can't figure it out in the statutes, I have somebody I can call.
And law school does an amazing job of teaching you how to do all that research and all that stuff.
The research, they teach you how to think like a lawyer, not necessarily practical skills to be one, though.
Interesting.
That is changing.
Because like when I went to paralegal studies, was my first degree, it was all of the practical application of doing everything that I hate to use this phrase, but that's what the teachers used at the time. As a paralegal, you're going to do everything the attorney doesn't want to do. And I was not about paperwork.
Yeah, so I have the greatest paralegal. He does a lot of the first drafting, or the majority of the drafting of stuff.
Paralegals are amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he probably doesn't get paid enough. He is fantastic.
Neither do you all as defense attorneys. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And you say there's 34 defense attorneys, you said something like
30
that?
or 40 for just MCAD. So there's also OPDC, which is the Oregon Public Defense Commission.
Mm-hmm.
They also have attorneys that are appointed. And there's Marion County Public Defenders. And then there are just private solo attorneys that also take court appointed work too. So
and the reason I ask this is that are there enough defense attorneys?
No.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
No, and in fact, there's a backlog. And there has been. So there are, last I looked, 800 and some. When I first started doing this in March, I had clients that had been waiting for an attorney to be appointed since May of the year prior.
Oh. In jail?
Not in jail. They were out, but that doesn't, remember, they're under a release agreement.
You're still kind of technically on probation without an attorney.
Yeah. And not getting your stress because there's nobody to ask questions to. So one of the big things in the news has been that there is this backlog, right? Yeah. Because there are constitutional rights you have. One of those is an attorney. If you can't afford one will be appointed to you. That's what Miranda rights say when they're read to you. And so there are not enough public defenders. And, there's a policy argument that maybe DAs are overcharging. Then there's the argument on the other side that we public defenders aren't taking enough cases and we should take more. And I'll just tell you, public defenders and court appointed attorneys are some of the hardest working individuals I have ever seen. And they're not paid what privately retained attorneys are paid.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you're not even paid at the same scale as prosecutors, right?
The pay might technically be the same, but what I get paid at my contract rate, I have to pay out my paralegal and my overhead. And so by the time all my office expenses are accounted for, no, it's not close.
Because they have all of those resources available to them that they don't have to worry about. So they get paid as a prosecutor, but then you don't have to pay for paper. You don't have to pay for the secretaries. You don't have to pay for the housing and the building. And yeah.
But I will say one thing that the legislature did do was they did pass funding, and it did two things. It made my job more secure because association like mine were supposed to sunset and go away in 2 years. And so shout out to Paul Evans, who is my rep, who did some hard work on that and made sure that that provision is gone. So I don't have to worry about my contract canceling, but also provided for more funding for more public defense attorneys. The problem is that there's not a lot of incentive for people to do this type of work. You have to want to do it.
Yeah.
You got to be the right person too, because you're dealing with an immense, diverse population of people with problems.
And the vicarious trauma has got to be off the charts.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, especially, like, I could only imagine the pain and the agony of somebody that you know is innocent has to go to jail. Ugh.
Like I said about that one client, I did not sleep. I thought about it for months.
Yeah.
It was not cool.
Heartbreaking.
It was extremely heartbreaking. And the client and I have talked about it since the client has been out, and you know, it's not the client's fault. It's the state's fault. Right. But it did push me to see what I could do to be a part of the solution. Really. I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
And, public defenders, I hear a lot of people disparage public defenders and court appointed attorneys. Oh, they're just working with the state to get a plea deal. I don't know one that is like that. I don't.
Hello? Pardon me 1 second. Good thing we have editing. Hello?
Yep, this must be the guy.
Oh,
I'm Stevie here.
Oh, yeah. Give me 15 more minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, I'll go hang out with my friends down
You're good. What's my next interview? We'll edit that out. And we're back. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. So I do want to kind of wrap up this conversation by talking about just that, right? Because I think that's very valuable for people to hear. Because I hate it when I hear people talk disparagingly against defense attorneys. Because the defense attorney network is the backbone infrastructure to keep innocent people out of jail and out of prison. It's what we need, and it's not embraced enough because, like we were talking about earlier, by the grace of God, are you not charged with a crime?
I think there's a general misunderstanding of what we do.
Yeah.
So my job is not necessarily to prove guilt or innocence, because it's the state's job to prove my client is guilty. My job is to make sure the state doesn't cheat when it's on its way trying to prove what it does, right? Did it follow the Constitution? And that is my job. And so did my client get his or her Miranda rights read? Was the search and seizure done correctly? Is there any defense to this case, right? And so sometimes my client did do it, right? And so then yeah, I'm going to try to do my best to negotiate the best plea that is the same as every other plea, regardless of my client's skin color or economic, situation. So we work hard in trying to make sure that somebody's constitutional rights are not being abused. That's our number one job.
And it's so important because our rights are our rights. They're unalienable. They are granted to us by the Constitution of the United States. And if we didn't have defense attorneys fighting to keep those rights, I'm not sure we would have any of those rights today.
No, and they're eroded every single day, right?
Yeah.
So we take for granted that there are 193 nations or countries in this world. Only 50 or 60 of them have a right to remain silent. Think about that for a second. And ours are the most robust rights. So in other countries, you can be compelled to say things.
And be held accountable if you don't say anything.
Or make a false,
Whew. That's intense. And then I think the way to wrap this up is, if you're out there listening, if we circle back to the beginning, always ask for an attorney. Don't say things to police. Just say, I want my attorney.
Say, I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right
To an attorney.
to an attorney.
And just keep repeating that over and over again.
Yeah, and don't chit-chat with them on the way to jail.
Yeah, right.
Because you can accidentally revoke your right. So, like, they're not your friends.
And they will pretend like they're your friends.
Yep, they can. Some of them do.
Lisa, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been really good.
Thanks for having me.
And again, I'll end this podcast the way I always end this podcast. Be kind, people. We're all on this planet together. We share the same air. And it's just so much easier to be kind. Thank you.
Thanks.